Hello and welcome back to the Abundant Living University. Today's topic, which will cover the topics of really university, learning some things we may not have known before. And I'd like to focus on the current disaster du jour in the media about how municipalities, states, local governments are all going to default and there's going to be a massive financial panic because it's going to happen. And I have to tell you that although history may not repeat itself, as someone once said, it does leave a very, very big shadow. For my birthday, my 10-year-old Eva got me a book I was interested in by Felix Rohatyn. Many of you may know who Felix Rohatyn was, but he was responsible for essentially putting New York City back on sound financial footing after it came close to bankruptcy in 1975. And what's really fascinating is in 1975, President Ford basically said to New York City, listen, you got union problems, you spent too much money, you have huge deficits, that's not my problem, it's not the federal government's problem. And the New York Daily News headline ran, Ford to New York, drop dead, unquote. But I'm really interested in this topic because essentially for our large cities and municipalities, things that are intrinsic to the well-being of the country, of course Ford couldn't let New York City go bankrupt. It would have caused New York State to go bankrupt and it would have rippled throughout the country. And in fact, President Ford signed a loan guarantee for the city of New York after much wrangling and an agreement by the city that they had to lower their deficits and pay their employees by 20% over 3 years, something they did in the late 70s. But Ford essentially guaranteed $2.3 billion worth of New York City bonds, enabled New York City to restructure its debt. Bondholders had to take a little bit of a haircut in terms of principal repayment and stretching out interest payments. And what's fascinating and unknown to me until I read this book is that those bonds that were guaranteed by the federal government just matured, finally, in 2008. So essentially, policymakers, when there's a crisis, will work out a solution. There is not an imminent default coming. And furthermore, remember that $2.3 billion that the federal government put out to help save New York City in 1975, in today's dollars, that's the equivalent of $540 billion, more than was spent to rescue the banks here back in 2008. So just a reminder, the states are not going out of business. If you own a diversified portfolio, certainly that means that you owned tax-free bonds, municipal bonds from around the country. And remember that yields are rising. The amount of interest that you can get today on a bond investment, like a bond index, has risen quite nicely over the last several months as prices have fallen. I highly recommend the book by Felix Rohatyn, A Nice Look at the Shadow of History. Would love your comments, and as always, we are so grateful for you, and keep tuning in.